Hello! Over 130 national teams have never qualified for the World Cup in their entire history. So I'll be ranking each and every one on a tier list based on how they're looking at the moment with their chances to qualify for a World Cup in the future. Should they be hopeful to qualify for a World Cup sometime soon? Will it just take a lot more time, or will it eventually happen? Or will the disappointment only continue? Or was there no dream to ever begin with? The tournament has just expanded for 2026, so there's definitely a lot more debutant possibilities. And you know, with the direction FIFA are going and wanting to constantly expand the World Cup, we really might see every single country qualify for the 2050 tournament. But for the purpose of this video, we'll stick to assuming it will stay at 48 teams, maybe 64 in the distant future. But the tiers are organized as followed. 2026 is in reach, meaning they have a shot to qualify for next year's tournament. Soon, meaning anytime, let's say between 2030 to 2042. Eventually, meaning maybe 2046 onward. Not likely, which signifies the nation should not lose hope, but at the moment I just don't see them qualifying for the world's biggest stage. And no chance, where if this national team qualified for a World Cup, I'd shave my head in disbelief. You can come back to this video in 2050 if a team I place there does qualify for the World Cup, telling me I have to stick to my forfeit. But who knows, I might not even have hair by then. Yeah, this video is obviously my opinion and open for discussion. Would love to eat my words on this video from many of the countries, so don't take offense to anything I say, please. Oh, and I'll definitely be brief with some of the countries, as this will be the longest tier list I've ever done. But as always, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and let's get into it. So I'll be going in order of confederations, so let's begin with UEFA. Starting off with Albania. This national team is definitely on the rise, as although they've never qualified for a World Cup, they have qualified for 2 Euro tournaments, both of them being in the modern edition as well, 2016 and 2024. Both times, unfortunately, were group stage exits, but this year in particular, there were a lot of signs of improvement. The Brazilian manager Silvinho at the helm is definitely the perfect fit, with Albania already being one of the most passionate nations in the world, and his tactics he provides, they're going to be doing wonderful things. Now, I am recording this right when the World Cup 2026 qualifiers in UEFA are only just beginning, and their group is by no means easy, but one they can handle. They've already faced England, where they lost there, but did get a very convincing scoreline against Andorra. But yeah, UEFA thought it was a good idea to unite them and Serbia in the same group. It's like they just want to pretend what happened 10 years ago never existed. Political stuff aside, a huge reason why I think it will be a mess in this group is because I do think it's going to be between those two countries to fight for that playoff spot. England will surely take first, but Serbia or Albania I think is fair game either or. If they push over Serbia there and get a favorable playoff draw in the next round, I definitely think they have what it takes to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. Moving on to Andorra. Yeah, this will be one of the national teams I'm going to be more brief on. They're at the no chance tier. I mean, they've only won 4 out of 57 matches in World Cup qualification and 1 out of 66 matches in the Euro qualifiers. Moving on now to Armenia. This national team have random spurts of hope for future success, but it's still never enough to qualify for a major international tournament. There's been some quality players coming from this nation, Mkhitaryan the most evident example, and in their most recent qualifier campaigns for the World Cup and Euros, they for sure put in some notable fights, even after Mkhitaryan's international retirement. Now, their manager is Van Schip, who managed Greece in the last World Cup qualifier run, ultimately not succeeding. And I don't really see him succeeding in this group either, with Portugal, Ireland, and Hungary. Cool team, they definitely have what it takes to rise on their own. But for me, it will happen maybe in the distant future. I'm tempted between eventually and soon. Do you know what? I'll say they have a shout, but it might not be easy to be at the soon tier. Azerbaijan now. Their most famous club, Karabakh, randomly turns up in Europe. Not so much this year, but they are an exciting bunch. Now, ultimately, the national team is one of the biggest underdogs in UEFA in the first place, so I wouldn't give them much of a chance for 2026. They've just hired Fernando Santos. Even though he won Portugal a Euro championship, his tactics are proven to be outdated and caused heartache for his own nation recently, then went on to take charge of Poland, diagnosing the entire nation with severe anxiety. Who knows, he does have that identity to take charge of some underdogs, but I still don't see him making some kind of impact for this nation. He will be sacked fairly soon, the next managers will struggle too, and overall for me, Azerbaijan are in a not likely position to qualify for the World Cup. Belarus now, not really a top competitor in Europe by any means, and have never really been close to qualifying for the World Cup. Their closest attempt was for the 2010 tournament, but still getting outclassed by all the teams above them. God, I hate looking at this table. They have had some great players throughout their time, like Alexander Hleb, who was an underrated gem for the Gunners. And if you want to go even further back, there's Vitaly Kutuzov. Seems like it's hard to judge now how things will pan out in the future. Maybe in 20-30 years, they could somehow be a powerhouse, but at the moment, things are looking not likely, just given the competitiveness UEFA have. We move on now to Cyprus. Since the 1994 qualifier campaign, they've always picked up at least one win for the World Cup specifically. Cannot say the same for the recent Euro run they had. Yeah, they have never qualified for a major international tournament before, despite putting off some good fights. Still, overall, it's been a similar record to Belarus like we've just mentioned. For me at the moment, it's not likely. Estonia now. Do you know what? Despite them being huge underdogs in UEFA, they have had some impressive qualifier campaigns. More specifically, it happened in the Euros, but they nearly qualified for the 2012 tournament, reaching the playoff stage, finishing over Serbia, Slovenia, and Northern Ireland. And this one's a bit of a stretch, but they were in the playoffs for the Euro 2024 qualifiers as they finished top of their Nations League group. Yeah, they immediately got annihilated, but this nation has shown that throughout time, they definitely have what it takes to put off some good, consistent fights. Most people are going to throw them at not likely, but Estonia should believe from their previous efforts. Not looking good at this moment of time, but let's put them at eventually. The Faroe Islands will take most of their motivation from their club team Klaksvík, who did become the first ever club in the nation to qualify for European football. In the international scene, they do have an impressive resume of some underdog upsets, like defeating Austria back in 1990 when they were at their beginnings, to Greece and Turkey most recently. This team might be onto something in the much distant future. They're a sneaky side. Ultimately, I don't think they will qualify for World Cup, but I wouldn't say it's a no chance tier. I'm putting them at not likely. Let's take a look now at Finland. Yes, the most shocking team out of all the UEFA countries to be on this list. Finland were never really seen as the strongest side, but you'd surely think they'd play at least one World Cup in their history, especially with most of the Nordic countries, even Iceland making an appearance. They've actually only just qualified for their first major international tournament at Euro 2020. But yes, despite having some legends of the game to some decent players as of recent, it truly is a shock. However, their most recent performances have not been brilliant whatsoever. Their long-term manager Konerva stepping down after failing to qualify for Euro 2024 and also did not put up a good fight in their Nations League group with no wins at all. Now comes in the Danish manager Jakob Friis, who has had a bit of a slow start in his first two World Cup qualifier matches. They should be in that 2026 tier, but it still feels like they have some random missing components, so I'm going to be placing them at soon. The U21 team is looking pretty good, qualifying for the U21 Euros over some solid teams. So at the moment, 2026 for me is not in the cards, but definitely they should be making a World Cup appearance sometime soon. Only if Poland end up in some catastrophe, they could take advantage, but right now I just don't see it for 2026. Moving on to a country I have a lot of hope and belief these days, as they should, Georgia. I mean, qualifying for their first ever Euro Championship just now, to also defeating Portugal, qualifying for the knockout rounds. These guys are cooking like the finest khachapuri. Kvicha Kvaratskhelia being the biggest name without a doubt, doing miracles for the national team even before that Napoli signing. To Mamardashvili, one of the most valuable goalkeepers right now, who registered the most saves at Euro 2024. So many underrated players as well all over Europe. They unite wonderfully under Willy Sagnol. My only issue for 2026 is their group though. Spain already proved their worth so many times against them, and Turkey also did beat them at Euro 2024. That being said, Turkey are one of the most inconsistent national teams in UEFA, so Georgia definitely have what it takes to pull off an upset. And like I went over, if they get at least second, they will get at least a playoff spot. This is not a flat out prediction, but they definitely have what it takes to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. Quite the contrast now we move on to Gibraltar, which seemed like the perfect team to put at the no chance tier. Granted, they only played their first official match in 2013. They still did not get a single win or even draw in a qualifier match. One of their most recent qualifier results was 14-0 to France. There's a better chance of Spain and the UK coming into agreement over Gibraltar's identity over them ever qualifying for the World Cup. Up next, we have Kazakhstan, who were actually never known to be a football nation, but their recent Euro 2024 qualifier campaign suggests that we cannot fully rule them out. They shocked many. Despite finishing fourth at the end, they went toe-to-toe with all the top three teams throughout the campaign, even beating Denmark at the beginning. Now, this country did start in the AFC, and that's where they played their first ever World Cup qualifier campaign in 1998. And despite being unsuccessful at the end, it was actually an impressive fleet, still picking up 5 wins in total. I think them switching federations definitely shot them in the foot quite a bit. UEFA definitely will provide a tougher competition, but these guys have proven that they're absolute warriors on the pitch. I don't want to say that they could qualify soon, but they have shown enough valuable efforts for me to put them in the eventually tier. Moving on to UEFA's youngest member, Kosovo. This side definitely do not have the highest expectations to begin with, but they actually do have a really solid crop of players to work with. But they still seem to fall short way too often in qualified campaigns. In the Euro qualifiers, they usually put out better fights, but only one World Cup qualifier win so far in their history, but in only 2 attempts to be fair. They might just need more time. Too young of a team to tell how their trajectory will go. But they already went off to a booming start with the quality of players they produce. This might be ambitious, but why not throw Kosovo at the soon tier. By 2042, they might have what it takes to pull it off. Latvia next, one of the few teams we're talking about in this video that actually did qualify for the Euros, clinching onto that playoff spot over Poland and Hungary and defeating Turkey there, a country who just finished 3rd place in the World Cup. The greatest thing to happen in Latvian football history, and they also had an impressive run in the World Cup 2010 qualifiers, finishing 3rd. Today, this side still halt teams randomly to change the course of their group, but they still don't give enough of an edge to push for those top spots. They should be throwing off either Albania or Serbia in their group, but I don't see them pushing through to qualify for the World Cup, at least in 2026. I wouldn't bank on it happening anytime soon either. I think eventually is fair. Liechtenstein, the only country to pick up a loss to San Marino, for me goes in no chance. Their only 2 World Cup qualifier victories came in 2006, and both were against Luxembourg. But yeah, this is one of the worst national teams in UEFA, so I am gonna put them in the bottom tier. Moving on to our final Baltic nation, Lithuania. All their campaigns were unsuccessful, but a few impressive displays. For example, in 1998, they were 1 point behind Ireland for that playoff spot. These guys just love their basketball too much, with all their money and attention going into this sport. With them getting so close before, I'll say that they might be able to eventually do it, but maybe I'm still pushing that factor. Moving on to the country to qualify for the most World Cup qualified campaigns, but still fall short every single time, Luxembourg. They have one of the longest serving managers right now, Luke Holtz, who seemed to take a solid charge in the Euro qualifiers recently, but then totally lost course in the Nations League. Anyway, he's been with the national team since 2010, and he still has a great crop of players right now. They're in a challenging group without a doubt, but one that they should be hopeful in. They have what it takes, but history suggests it won't go well for them. I don't see them making it in 2026, and soon also might be a stretch. I'm going to put them in eventually. Malta, I'm sorry, I gotta be brief with. Some cool talent popping in, but it's never enough. Maybe if they produce 3 Teleteumas, they could pull it off, but 3 World Cup qualifier wins in 97 matches, they're going at no chance. Moldova is one of the lowest ranked UEFA teams, but they still surprised at the last Euro qualifier campaign, going toe-to-toe with many teams to fight for a spot at the tournament, eventually crashing out though. But they never let the likes of Poland beat them. Impressive, but like I hinted earlier, Poland were in an absolute mess, many thanks to this guy. And they randomly still fall short or just squeeze through against some other quote-unquote easier opponents. Maybe in the future Moldova can build themselves up, but right now it's not likely for me. Montenegro now, you can say they qualified before with Serbia in 2006, but they never actually have as an independent nation. Even while having some top players, it has still been a tough task. Still, they always go out with an admirable fight. 3 wins minimum each time since the 2014 campaign. And in the Euro 2012 qualifiers, they did make it to the playoffs, just failing there. I feel like this team are just missing some good alignment of timing with some generational crop. They really are a quality side though. Do I want to be nice and put them at soon or throw them in that eventually tier? Screw, within 15 years, Montenegro have what it takes to qualify for the World Cup. North Macedonia now. How crazy was their World Cup 2022 qualifier campaign? They defeated Germany in the groups, qualified for the playoffs, but then looked to be doomed with the pair-up of Italy, followed with a Portugal or Turkey. But they actually upset Italy even while traveling there. Just could not do the job against Portugal at the end. Such a shame. If they weren't any other path, they might have been able to pull it off. Right now their group is tricky, but one where they can believe. They'll have to pull off a miracle maybe against Belgium and show more class over an in-form Wales. This national team are on the rise though, with a lot of belief, especially after qualifying for their first ever Euro tournament in 2020. They also just topped their Nations League group with a lot of convincing displays. Man, I do think Macedonia deserve to be up at soon or even 2026. How can you say they don't have a chance? I know their group is tough, but they might be able to pull it off. And our final UEFA team to go over, San Marino. Unfortunately, the worst ranked national team in the world do have a long way to go. They still have yet to beat any other team other than Liechtenstein. Best of luck, San Marino. Please prove me wrong, but no chance seems to be valid. Now we move on to the AFC. This confederation is in a much further state compared to the others for their road to the 2026 World Cup. Some have already secured a World Cup spot, and they're currently in their 3rd round with 3 different groups. Or in the 2nd round, many teams have already gone through their failure. I think it might be easier to start off this confederation with the teams that are still in that 3rd round, and then move on to the teams that got eliminated in the 2nd, which are many. Keep in mind, at the time of this recording, in the 3rd round, there are 2 more match days to go. So in Group A of the 3rd round, there are 2 countries that have never qualified for the World Cup before, and that would be current 2nd place holders Uzbekistan along with Kyrgyzstan. Uzbekistan are in such an incredible position though, to the point where if you're watching this video only a month after I upload it, they might have already qualified for the World Cup, which is truly astonishing with how great of a rise this team has had. They have had solid qualification campaigns before. I'm looking at 2014 in particular, where they got heartbroken massively. Topped the first group stage undefeated over Japan, and then in the next phase tied on points with South Korea, only falling short to third by a 1-goal difference, which put them in the 5th round. In that 5th round, they took on Jordan, who defeated them on penalties over 2 legs, which all ended up being a waste as Jordan got decimated by Uruguay 5-0 in the Interconfederation playoffs, which followed. Hopefully they don't go through a similar unlucky scenario here, as they only need one more draw against the UAE to secure their tickets to the World Cup at the time of this recording. But even if they fall short there, I do have faith in them to excel. This is the best they've been looking since forming the Football Federation, with Shomurodov at striker, Faizulev surely going to earn a big move soon to getting their first countryman to sign for the Premier League, and one of the best clubs possible as well, Hushanov. Great generation they have. I don't want to go way too in depth because, like I said, by the time you're watching this video, they might have already qualified for the World Cup. And also, if they do, I want to make a more in-depth video on them specifically. So yeah, I will be putting Uzbekistan in 2026 for sure. Kyrgyzstan, though, is not as good of a situation as Uzbekistan are in. Currently, as things stand, they are going to get eliminated. They will need to win their final 2 matches in this 3rd round, along with hoping Qatar falls short, which could happen to be fair. But what they have done so far regardless is impressive, as this is the first time they made it this far in World Cup qualification history. And they have established themselves to be a difficult place to travel to. I mean, they put off some really impressive results against the likes of Iran and Uzbekistan, despite losing, still scoring twice against them both. And they recently got a huge win against Qatar, keeping their dream alive to qualify for the 4th round. Very impressive for a country that is mostly mountains. They're actually 4th in the world in terms of elevation, and have been getting some interesting players to declare citizenship, like their current striker who was on a roll, Joe Kojo, who was actually born in Ghana. They have been on a patient but successful rise. Since becoming their own national team after the breakup of the Soviet Union, they have qualified for 2 Asian Cups, and they were both in the last 2 editions. This nation could continue to rise as they're only showing signs of improvement. Although they still do mathematically have a chance to qualify for the 2026 World Cup, I'm going to say it probably will not happen, but I will not be surprised if it does happen sometime soon. When it comes to Group B, we've got 3 countries that have never played in a World Cup: Jordan, Oman, and Palestine. Let's start with the one I'd feel most confident to place in the 2026 tier, Jordan. Their rise is truly noticeable after just becoming Asian Cup finalists when no one expected them to. They had such a tough road, overcoming the likes of Iraq, who defeated Japan. They beat South Korea, just couldn't handle the Qatar heat. But now at the time of this recording, they are 2nd in their World Cup qualifier group, 3rd round. Things are still way too tight here though, of course, but they only picked up 1 loss so far against South Korea. These guys should take care of business, if not this round, the next one for sure. It's impossible to sink in their Dead Sea, and I don't think they'll be sinking in this World Cup qualification campaign either. As for Oman, I'm not as confident in them, but they're definitely still in the race, of course. Just 3 points behind Jordan, so we cannot write them off. I don't think they've been playing as convincing football, but even if they fail in this 3rd round, they still most likely secured a spot for the 4th round. Therefore, although I don't see it as likely to happen, I'm still going to put them in that 2026 tier, just given their chances going forward. Palestine is even less in reach, honestly, in a very similar position to Kyrgyzstan, 4 points behind the 4th round spot. Despite only having 1 win, they're actually playing some interesting and passionate football, always providing competition but getting hindered by individual mistakes. I don't want to completely rule them out, but I do think it will be too tough of a task for 2026. For me, it's either soon or eventually, but the fact that I'm so on the fence about it, I think soon is fair. And in Group C, there's only one team that has never played in a World Cup before, and that is Bahrain. Bahrain are still chasing that 2026 dream, being only 3 points behind 4th place Indonesia. They just don't realistically have a chance for the top 2. 2026 might be too tough for this nation, even though they put off some good fights. But I'm still gonna put them there as there's mathematically a chance, and this nation actually has a very interesting World Cup qualification history. Back in 2006, they were so close to qualifying for a World Cup, going into a 4th round playoff with Uzbekistan, winning the 2-leg tie on away goals, but then lost to Trinidad and Tobago 2-1 on aggregate. That being said, they got a bit lucky that their first match against Uzbekistan was replayed. Uzbekistan won that match, but complained to FIFA about a penalty not being awarded. They wanted a 3-0 victory, but instead, FIFA ordered a replay. It's one of the smallest countries, but they also pulled off some massive wins. This team don't get enough credit. 2026 is definitely a steep task, but we cannot count them out just yet. Okay, so that's all the teams that are still in the race for 2026. Now let's take a look at all the teams that are no longer in contention for that top tier. Starting with Brunei, they're a national team that consistently gets beatings every year. Their football scene is underdeveloped and don't have the resources to compete at the highest levels. I just cannot see them making it. They're going at no chance. Same with Bhutan. Too many batterings, a few wins here and there, but still amongst the lower ranks of Asia. Only 9 wins in their history. Obviously, not a lot of priority is going into the Football Federation. I'll be more quick with the no chance teams as this tier list is very long. Guam, Maldives, Macau, and Timor-Leste, I think all should go there. These are all national teams that have never even qualified for the Asian Cup, by the way. Let's cover the rest of the countries in that category. For most, I'll put them at not likely, such as Afghanistan. This country has experienced decades of political unrest, conflict, and war, which obviously takes a massive hit at their football infrastructure. Moving on to Mongolia, they face a challenge especially many nations in Asia experience. Football is not their main sport. The country overall has a higher interest in wrestling and archery, resulting in a cultural disconnect with not much talent or investment. And even though they're a massive country by size, their population is still less than Croatia's. Moving on to another mountainous region, Nepal. These guys love to climb to the top literally, just not in the football world. Home of the tallest mountain on planet Earth above sea level. If they built a stadium at the Everest base camp and held all their qualifier matches there, they'd have some insane altitude advantage and be able to pull off some Bolivia-esque results. But they'd be getting scrapped a ton in this qualifier campaign. They scored their only 2 goals in the second round against Yemen on the final day in a match they still could not win. Now, Pakistan have also never qualified for the Asian Cup before and have only gotten 1 World Cup qualification win in history, which only just came for this campaign against Cambodia. It allowed them to proceed to the next round where they conceded 26 goals. With this abysmal record and also them being ranked the 12th worst national team in the world according to the FIFA rankings, surely they should be a team in no chance, but I'm going to put them at not likely. What's been holding Pakistan back without a doubt is lack of priority. Similar to Mongolia, instead of archery and wrestling though, they love their cricket. But the main issue actually stems to their federation. They have been suspended by FIFA several times due to third-party influence, like their former president refusing to step down and holding people hostage inside the federation's office, but also many times failed to participate in continental tournaments and qualification campaigns due to financial difficulties. Their first time attempting to qualify for a World Cup was in 1990, which is a shame as in the 60s and 70s they had their best ever talent. They are the second most populated country to never play in the World Cup before with over 240 million people. So they seriously should be doing better, and they can. They just need to brush up on many factors. They have one of the messiest federations in the football sphere, which is holding them back. If they sort it out, they could eventually qualify, but history suggests that it's going to be a very long road and it's looking very doubtful, which is why I'm putting them at not likely. Now, Sri Lanka is quite interesting to analyze, as a lot of their flaws also stem to many of Pakistan's problems. Number 1, they love their cricket. Number 2, though, their federation is also corrupt and has been suspended on multiple occasions for the same reason, third-party influence. Very poor funding, they're also one of the worst ranked teams in Asia, but also surprisingly have 3 whole more wins in World Cup qualification compared to Pakistan. But something that is going this nation's way is that they are starting to bring in players with dual nationality, and they're going all out in this factor. Their last Asian Cup qualifier match against Thailand, 10 out of 11 players they fielded in their starting 11 were dual nationals. There's obviously still a very long way to go with them being one of the worst ranked national teams in the world. But going forward, they're definitely striving for improvement. So instead of not likely, I'm going to put them in the eventually tier, as they're already one step ahead of many of the lowest ranked national teams in FIFA. But moving on to our last country to never even qualify for the Asian Cup, Laos. Obviously not likely with that factor, of course, but this nation seemed to be implementing some new strategies in order to develop their youth. Work is obviously needed though. They failed to even qualify for the 2026 World Cup second round and failed to for the 2022 tournament as well. Now, since we've just done Laos, let's go over the other Southeast Asian countries. I hate to be repetitive, but Cambodia should also be in the not likely section. The team to give Pakistan their only ever World Cup qualifier win in history. But in 2022, they got decimated by Iran twice in a row. Combining both match scorelines, that's 24-0. So it's hard to see them ever making it, but they have had some resurgence after decades of nearly nothing. South Korean manager Lee Tae-hoon introduced significant development in football for the nation. Since his implementation, we saw the first ever Cambodian international play professional football outside Cambodia, Chan Vatanaka. So nothing's impossible, but it's been slow, and for now, I just don't see any signs of massive improvement for them to play at the world's biggest stage. Now we put so many at not likely, we'll change it up for Malaysia. This nation has some of the most passionate, yet to put it nicely, unrealistic fans. Somehow with rumors turning up for Burnley captain Josh Brownhill having Malaysian descent, yet to publicly announce that it wasn't true. But let's focus on the positives. I actually do think this country have a bright future ahead of them. Since 2022, there has been a resurgence with a new energetic play from the nation. They have never made it out of the group stage in the Asian Cup, but in the last one they pulled off a 3-3 draw to South Korea to get their only point. I think they will get there eventually. Maybe not so soon, but Malaysia have what it takes to build what they have. They're so unpredictable, but I love it. Now, Vietnam, at the time of this recording, are at an all-time high as they have just won the AFF Championship. Although they fell short in the 2026 qualification to their beloved Indonesia, they actually did quite well in 2022. They made it to that third round where we saw a very familiar group, but Vietnam fell dead last, to be fair, putting off some very good fights from time to time. This nation actually have a promising future, and I think they have what it takes to qualify soon, as they have had some incredible high points within their history, so maybe eventually luck will go their way. Now moving on to Singapore. These guys actually established Project 2034 in hopes to qualify for a World Cup soon, but at the moment, it's not looking good. Unlike some of the other nations we're talking about here, this country definitely have the funds to establish themselves. But the reality is they do need a more strategic approach. I mean, they have some of the best stadiums and facilities in the continent, but many point fingers at the Football Association. According to many, they play a huge reason for their downfall, but also the government lacks any priority in sports. In many regards, but for example, forcing male athletes to service for 2 years without any real leniency. Such a wealthy country seems disconnected from a lot of football culture. It leaves the nation not excelling to their full potential, which is a shame, as if they had their priorities straight, they would definitely have what it takes to qualify for the World Cup soon. It will take a lot of time, but there's no reason why they couldn't turn it around. For me, Singapore go in the eventually tier. They've won numerous AFF championship titles up until 2012, but since have declined. Thailand, despite being the most decorated AFF championship side, have had many shortcomings in World Cup qualification. In 2026, they experienced huge heartbreak to share points and stats with China across the board, and still fell short to third to advance to the next round. In 2018, they did make it to the third round but finished last place with no wins. Although this side seemed to be like one of the better teams in Southeast Asia when it comes to history, they still seem to struggle against the tougher teams in the Confederation. But with just a few tweaks, who knows what they will be down the line. It's eventually or soon, but if we're going to be generous to Vietnam, I think we have to be for Thailand as well. They have made it to the final round a few times, so maybe luck will go their way one year. Myanmar next. They've had their golden era long before, where they won multiple Asian game titles, but faced a severe decline for about 40 years. After a spark of hope in the 2010s, where their U20 team qualified for the World Cup, there has now been a descent with some players refusing to play for the national team due to the junta movement. This obviously leaves Myanmar's future quite unpredictable, and to be fair, their first World Cup they tried to qualify for was 2010. Who knows what the future holds, but right now the instability within the nation makes me think it's not likely that they'll qualify for the World Cup. Now, the Philippines throughout history have always prioritized boxing and basketball, which throughout history saw a lack of funding in football, resulting in a huge decline. The decline was so massive that back in the day, some of their professional footballers literally switched to basketball, but in more recent times, they've seen a lot more signs of improvement, getting their first World Cup qualifier win in 2012, which resulted destroying Sri Lanka 4-0, and then their first World Cup qualifier away win against Yemen in 2015, and of course the big one, securing their first ever Asian Cup appearance in 2019. I'm gonna say that it eventually happens for the Philippines. Hong Kong have also made some recent improvements, only just playing in their first ever Asian Cup since 1968 last year. They had some admirable World Cup qualification attempts like in 1986 where they got 5 wins but in a doable group, but also in 2018 they were only 3 points away from going to the third round, with China spoiling their party. They've got some international stars they had been able to acquire over the years, but they still remain as such a minnow in the AFC, so it's gotta be eventually or not likely. Now for Chinese Taipei or Taiwan, I think this is too big of an underdog in Asia, unfortunately. They played in the earliest stages of the Asian Cup but haven't qualified since 1968, and after even briefly switched to the OFC. Since their return, they have not really made their mark and have definitely declined since the early days. However, hope is on the way with investments made in grassroots, with the Taiwan Football Premier League only just being founded in 2017. Regardless, it will take a lot of time to show any signs of improvement with the national team in specific. I'm gonna have to put them at not likely. And of course, the famous India, one of the most populated countries on planet Earth. Now, they did qualify back in 1950 because everyone in their qualifier group withdrew, but they withdrew themselves 10 days before the tournament. The federation thought it was smarter to prioritize focusing on the Olympics in Helsinki and justify that they did not have the financial means to make the trip to Brazil for the World Cup. FIFA and several associations across India offered to help pay for the trip, but India still declined the offer, which ended up being one of the worst decisions to this date for the national team. They did have some notable players over the years, including one who just came out of international retirement in order to help his country as much as possible, Sunil Chhetri. The legend of India is the 4th highest international goal scorer of all time, but India have never had a solid stride in World Cup qualification. Their best goal was in 2002, where they got the most amount of wins, which was 3. And for this tournament, they only got 1. But had one of the most controversial calls go against them against Qatar, where a ball was deemed to go out of play prior to their opposition's goal, but the ref still allowed it. The country also failed to get a single win all of 2024. So how can the most populated country not find a way to make it to the world's biggest stage? Well, just like many other national teams, grassroots is a huge issue, but also the fact that this nation cannot take the same approach as the likes of Sri Lanka. In India's law, they forbid dual nationals, which really hinders the amount of talent that they do have to their disposal across the globe. But of course, like Sri Lanka and Pakistan, they also love their cricket. If they allow dual nationals and improve on their grassroots, they actually could be a force to reckon with and qualify with the amount of talent they have to their disposal. I will have to put India at eventually at the moment. I just don't see it happening very soon. Bangladesh are an interesting one, as they face similar issues like Pakistan and India with lack of interest and priorities. Not as populated as India, but they are one of the most populated countries to never play in the World Cup. But many people from this nation are hopeful in their future, as they have taken dual citizen Hamza Chaudhuri, who made his first appearance recently in the Asian Cup qualifiers. And holy shit, did he receive one of the most insane welcomes. This nation are desperate of some revival, as they did face some dark times. Now obviously, one player who has played in the Premier League before won't make all the difference for this country, just ask Pakistan. But I think they will build on that general strategy in the future to appoint more players. And with them looking determined in this regard, I will put them at eventually. They did get a handful of World Cup qualifier wins in the past, so they can eventually do it, but work definitely needs to be done. Syria, now this is a nation that definitely could have a chance at some point. They've racked up an impressive amount of wins in some qualification campaigns. 6 in 2010, 9 in 2018, and 8 in 2022. 2018 specifically, look at the standings for that third round. Just 2 points away from securing World Cup qualification. They still achieved a 4th round spot where they took on Australia and only just lost to Australia, with Cahill seeing the deal in extra time, an 109th minute goal. Oh, and let's not forget that in 1994, this country tied on points with Iran in their first round group and still finished undefeated. They have more wins than losses in World Cup qualification, but still have never qualified for a World Cup. And they've shown so much fight throughout the year, so surely their luck will come at some point. I'll put Syria at soon. Yemen has been going through a civil war since 2014, but in general, the country's football infrastructure is severely underdeveloped. Even their domestic league is in disarray, many seasons the league not even being held. The fragile state of the nation makes it seem like it will be very unlikely we'll see them bounce back in the future. Lebanon have never really came close to qualifying. I mean, they did put off an admirable fight back in 2002, and for the 2014 tournament, they did make it to the 3rd round, but finished last there. And there are many common barriers as to why this country failed to succeed so many times. But the passion that this country always gives makes me a tad bit hopeful for them. They've gotten some impressive wins recently and actually have been undefeated for some time. And even in World Cup qualification, despite getting knocked out heavily in that group, they annihilated Bangladesh at one point. This national team throughout history do have some spirits of hope, but do lack consistency to push through till the end in a World Cup spot ride or die basis. But improvements have been made. They've qualified for the last 2 Asian Cups despite not playing for one since 2000, and are one of the favorites in their group to qualify for 2027. I want to be hopeful in Lebanon and say they have what it takes eventually to get a spot, but it is definitely not going to be easy. Turkmenistan with their authoritarian government can definitely hinder football development. They have limited exposure to high international football, despite having one of the coolest home stadiums. Now, the biggest highlight for this country actually ties in with club football. Last season, newly emerged club Arkada got 30 for 30 wins with a 127 goal difference, while second place got 39. The club was only founded in 2023 and has never lost a league match. Obviously, we're mainly taking a look at the national team, but many players on this club are also on the national team. Their dominance since assembled, though, has obviously hindered their competitiveness since playing internationally. While Arkadog is winning all of their matches, the national team lost all of their 2024 fixtures. In fact, the national team manager, since appointed at the beginning of 2023, has gotten his first win in March 2025. The instability of all this leaves me doubtful for Turkmenistan. I will put them at not likely. But now we move on to our final AFC nation, Tajikistan, who actually just told a remarkable story in the last Asian Cup. Their first ever time qualifying for the tournament, they reached the quarterfinals. But are we going to give them all the praise for that moment and say this means they'll qualify for a World Cup at some point? Unlike Turkmenistan, they have a decent amount of players playing for clubs outside of their nation, which obviously is a huge plus when it comes to providing experience. The improvements have all been random and quite sudden, so it's quite hard to gauge how they will do. I'd like to see more from them in World Cup qualification specifically, obviously. They never made it close in that regard, but you can't deny that they are on the right track. Maybe, just maybe, they'll qualify for a World Cup when I am a much older age. Now let's move on to the quickest confederation we'll be going over, CONMEBOL, as there's only one nation in this confederation that have never qualified for a World Cup before, and that would be Venezuela. Baseball is their main sport, but El Vino Tinto still have had many impressive football displays. They look to have a good run in this World Cup qualifier campaign, which is already underway, but did slip a tad bit. With the expansion of the tournament, I still think they have what it takes to make it in 2026. They just have to find that spark they had not that long ago. They were really impressive in the last Copa America, so I would not rule them out just yet. It seems like they will have to battle it out for that 7th place playoff spot, and they definitely have what it takes to clinch that. Maybe you'll have more faith in the other nations to return to form like Chile and Peru, but I do think Venezuela have what it takes to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. If not, surely soon. Let's not forget that FIFA did say they want to expand the 2030 tournament to 64 teams. And CONMEBOL's president already came out saying he loved the idea. I'm sure Venezuela would love it as well, as that would essentially scratch the entirety of CONMEBOL World Cup qualification. But wouldn't they want to participate in their first ever World Cup knowing that they actually earned that spot? Regardless, I think they can sometime soon, whether or not that 64 team expansion happens. Moving on now to the OFC, the confederation that is now guaranteed one World Cup spot. Prior, they were not guaranteed a single one, and only New Zealand have qualified before twice through the intercontinental playoffs. But now with the expansion of the tournament, the Kiwis are looking to make it every single time. Although for the most part throughout history, they have absolutely dominated this confederation, especially with now Australia moving to the AFC.
Beltron has the moves!
Well, how about next time you get a board that can handle the Neutron style?
Along with the guaranteed World Cup spot, the OFC is still guaranteed an intercontinental playoff spot as well, which currently New Caledonia possess as they lost to New Zealand in that final match 3-0. Now, although their chances are not looking so good, you just never know with football. We have to put them in the 2026 tier for now. It's probably not going to happen since they just got outplayed by New Zealand, but you never know how much their opposition might underestimate a side like this. A few positives to take from this team. They were runners-up twice in the OFC Nations Cup, a tournament which New Zealand and Australia almost always win. The only time it wasn't one of them was Tahiti in 2012. And they do have some solid players, but many of them are playing in the lower leagues of France, so it truly would be incredible if they pull this off. The rest though, I'm sorry Oceania, it's time to be brief. Of course, football is miracle moments and the OFC is small. Only 10 nations are in this confederation. So with one guaranteed spot and one intercontinental playoff spot, who knows what the future will hold? Especially with the expansion, maybe football can grow in this part of the world and be taken much more seriously per each national team. But a few teams to say that there's absolutely no chance include Tonga, Samoa, Cook Islands, and American Samoa. These teams are the lowest in the FIFA rankings, but also their results cannot justify any brilliance. Cook Islands literally got cooked by Tahiti back in 1971 where they lost 30-0. American Samoa allowed Australian international Archie Thompson to set the record of the most individual goals in a single World Cup qualifier match in a 31-0 victory. Even though some of these results are much deeper within history, they haven't really shown that they have bounced back in form. But for the other nations, for example Papua New Guinea, their biggest loss was to Malaysia 10-0, and Vanuatu was 9-0 against New Zealand in their very first international match. Still, those two countries seem like they would massively struggle in the playoffs even if they're lucky enough to reach there, so I'm going to put them at not likely. So that only leaves us with 3 more national teams since I already went over New Caledonia. And although I think all of them will massively struggle for a World Cup spot, I think these three nations have shown more glimpses of hope compared to the other OFC nations. Tahiti, like I mentioned, were the only team to win an OFC Nations Cup trophy apart from Australia or New Zealand. Solomon Islands, I thought, have shown some rise in recent years, although they fumbled in this World Cup qualification campaign. And Fiji as well. I mean, they got unlucky to not be that playoff team where New Caledonia stand, all because they had to face New Zealand in the semifinals of that mini bracket where they got annihilated 7-0. At the moment, the quality of the OFC compared to the other nations, unfortunately, is too huge. So if any of those three teams do make it to the playoffs, at this moment, they would most likely be smoked. New Zealand is just proving it where they outclass every team nearly all the time. Also, to put into perspective with the FIFA rankings, New Zealand are 86th, while the next best Solomon Islands are 149th. It really all depends, will football grow in the OFC in the distant future? I don't see it really happening anytime soon for the other nations, but I think it's fair to say that eventually we could see another OFC representative play in the World Cup. Time for Africa now, another massive list. So again, pardon me if I'm brief on some of these. However, this might be the toughest confederation to really give an estimate on, as African football is probably the most chaotic of them all. It's so tough to call, and many countries that seem like they didn't really have a chance to qualify have. In this confederation, Africa is over halfway through this round in particular. First place qualify, and only some of the second place teams go into the playoffs. Starting off with Benin. Looking at the group, they're definitely still in contention, and they have some positives, like defeating Nigeria for the first time in their entire history this qualification campaign. And also, in 2010 did have an admirable run, but still fell short to Ghana. A crazy random fact about this nation is that in 2019, they made it to the quarterfinals of the Africa Cup of Nations despite not winning a single match. I don't think they'll qualify so soon, and I think they'll probably start to crack in this 2026 qualifier campaign, but eventually Benin might have what it takes. Next up, Botswana. I'm going to put them at not likely. Definitely not the most popular football team in Africa, but they have had an interesting recent rise, qualifying for their second ever AFCON and are still in contention to qualify for 2026, just not necessarily looking likely. With the competition Africa has, I think there are a few other nations that are showing a more promising sign of stature, but Botswana should not be fully ruled out. Burkina Faso in recent times has been regarded as one of the best countries to never qualify for the World Cup in their history. They have had many impressive qualifier campaigns, just falling short like in 2010 where they racked up 9 wins, and for the 2014 tournament losing to Algeria on the final round due to the away goal rule. And right now with the expanded format, I do think that they are 2026 contenders. They're currently at the time of this recording looking to be the favorites to secure that second place spot behind Egypt. They just need to establish themselves as one of the 4 best second place teams, which they do need to work on. They always seem to have so much quality on paper backing them, just have never really proven to be one of the top dogs in Africa. But still, they remain as one of the stronger teams in the confederation, so surely 2026, if not sometime soon. Burundi I have to throw in at not likely. Just one AFCON appearance and never really a convincing road to the World Cup. Right now they are embarking on their best ever journey, but the gap of quality in the group is still quite noticeable. The nation are investing in more youth development, so maybe they can qualify in the very distant future, but to me the Swallows don't really have the greatest chance now. And yes, that is actually their nickname. Cape Verde right now are top of their group, even over Cameroon. It's really a tight race though, 1 point separating the two. But overall this nation have been improving a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do see them at the World Cup soon. They are 100% in contention to qualify for the World Cup in 2026. Cameroon obviously still are the favorites, but they're not to be trusted despite being undefeated still. But yeah, they made it to 2 AFCON quarterfinals and surprisingly did not qualify for the 2025 tournament, which was definitely a bit of a shock. But still, their form did return in the World Cup qualifiers, so maybe their eyes are only on qualifying for the world's biggest stage. Central African Republic, despite convincing King Kongdobia to join, have never even qualified for an AFCON. He's their best player to ever represent the national team. Despite having a few other underrated links, this nation have been extremely quiet throughout their history. In World Cup qualification, they've only managed 1 win max in each campaign. Obviously, this one is still continuing though. They are regarded as one of the weakest teams in Africa, but still did pull off some very significant upsets, like defeating Algeria and Egypt in AFCON qualification. They've only been consistently attempting to qualify for major international tournaments though since 2002. So maybe hope can be restored in the distant future, but I'm putting them at not likely. Moving on to Chad. They essentially have no chance of revival in this World Cup qualifier campaign, already picking up 6 for 6 losses and scoring only 1 goal, and have never really even been close in qualification attempts. Unfortunately, this federation suffered a lot of financial problems. They withdrew from AFCON 2017 qualification because of this regard. Because they withdrew, CAF also banned them from even attempting to enter in 2019 as well. In 2021, the government also attempted to dissolve dissolved the Football Federation, which resulted in a ban from FIFA, and CAF disqualified them again from attempting to qualify for AFCON in 2021. So yeah, financial issues and government irregulations not complying with FIFA's rules, Chad probably got no chance. Comoros is one of my favorite underdog stories though. Their AFCON debut in 2021 was crazy, defeating Ghana 3-2 in the group stage, and then in the knockouts barely lost to Cameroon, while having an outfield player in goal due to 12 of their players getting COVID. Now in the World Cup qualifiers, once again they have gotten the best of Ghana, handing the group leaders their only loss so far. They have fallen off in form a tad bit though, losing to Mali and barely defeating Chad. But still, second place for their standards in front of the likes of Mali is not what many would expect, with a country that has a population of less than 1 million. That would make them one of the smallest countries by population to ever qualify. 2026 might be a steep task, but we cannot fully rule them out, especially with the surprises they've given us in the past. The craziest thing is they have only been attempting to qualify since 2010, and have achieved their only 4 wins in World Cup qualification history in this campaign. Congo is definitely open for interpretation. I mean, they definitely won't make it in 2026 as they've been banned from FIFA due to third-party influence. But despite this campaign being out of the question, they have had a decent run back in 2014. The problem obviously is a lot of instability within the federation, which is definitely holding them back, but I wouldn't say it's impossible for them. It does look like they're going backwards a bit, as in 2022 and 2026, they failed to get a single winning qualification, and the last time that happened was in 1994. But they could yo-yo their way back up at some point, so I'll be generous and say it just might eventually happen. We move on now to Djibouti, who have been respectfully getting absolutely cooked in their group, only picking up 1 draw. A federation that's also been battling with a lot of financial constraints they've had to pull out randomly through qualification campaigns, and have also only been attempting since 2002. Such a small population as well, I think they might have to go and no chance, I'm sorry. Moving on to Equatorial Guinea, might be one of the most underrated nations in this confederation, at least in recent times. All of their 4 AFCON appearances, they have never been grouped, and were doing quite well in this qualification campaign for the World Cup, until their forward Nsu was found ineligible to play for the national team this whole time, despite playing for them since 2013. And it's a shame because despite playing in the 3rd tier of Spain, this guy was balling out for his nation. Anyway, this massively put a stint in this campaign because it required their early consecutive 1-0 victories to change to 3-0 defeats as a punishment for this as well. So with this setback, it's looking like it's very unlikely that they will qualify for 2026, but I still think they have what it takes to do it soon. Perfect team to put there because they've overall been very convincing. Even in the last World Cup qualification, 2 points behind Tunisia, who did qualify for the World Cup themselves. For Ethiopia's case, they were incredibly close in 2014, and that was the closest they've ever got, topping their group, but having to face Nigeria where they lost both legs in the final playoff round. This obviously makes it impossible to put them in the not likely or no chance tier because they've proved their grit. But it was a miracle moment for the team, as all the other campaigns so far, only 1 win max apart from that one. All their bright history came from their earliest history, where they won the 1962 Africa Cup of Nations. It makes them one of the pioneers of African football, but since have just faced struggle for World Cup appearances, and also have not recently qualified for many AFCONs. Not enough of their players are getting the experience abroad, and their own domestic league is not getting enough investment and development, which obviously hinders any type of growth. They're the 2nd most populated nation in Africa though, with only Nigeria in front of them. So I think they should stay hopeful, but I don't think it will happen necessarily anytime soon for Ethiopia. I'm going to put them at eventually. Eritrea, like some of the other nations we just talked about, have only been attempting to qualify since 2002, but have yet to get a single win. They withdrew from the World Cup 2026 qualifiers as well, due to concerns that players might seek political asylum during international trips. Eritrea, as things stand, have got no chance to qualify for the World Cup. Eswatini, shout out to these guys for drawing to Cameroon recently, but they still don't have a win in this campaign. And most campaigns they failed to find any wins since 1994. Just 4 in total out of 27 matches. With never qualifying for AFCON either, it makes them a serious underdog within the Confederation. Things can change, they randomly do surprise in the Confederation, but for me, at the moment, it's looking not likely for Eswatini. Gabon at the time of this recording are the best 2nd place team. Really have the chance to top Ivory Coast, they've been going really neck and neck. How satisfying would it be to see Aubameyang at this tournament? He had a solid performance at Marseille last season and is still banging in a solid amount in Saudi Arabia. There's Dennis Bouanga as well, one of the best MLS footballers, Galatasaray's midfielder Lema. I think this is one of the teams that have a genuine chance to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. Of course, I know I put Comoros there because they're still very much in the race, but I definitely have a better feeling about the likes of Gabon. The Gambia have had some decent AFCON tales not too long ago. However, they are basically out of the race now with only one win so far against Seychelles and a draw to Kenya. They're such an exciting team, but they definitely lack consistency, despite having one of the craziest fighting spirits I've seen. Despite all the excitement in their own continental tournaments, World Cup qualification has usually ended in disaster. Once Gambia does pick up the consistency though, I actually do see them being a proper threat. They've pulled off some shockers in recent times. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but who's to say it won't happen eventually for the Gambia. Guinea currently possess one of the best strikers in all of Africa. Girassi scored the most goals out of any African player in a single Champions League season, but has still yet to score a goal in World Cup qualification. Just 2 wins so far for the nation in this campaign, and it's disappointing as it looked like they had what it takes to get second at least. I think they blew their chances this year as they didn't show enough consistency, and they also failed to qualify for the Africa Cup of Nations. But still, they've always seemed to have some edge over many African nations, so I will put them at soon. Guinea-Bissau have qualified for 4 consecutive AFCONs and did not get a single win in any, as they've had talents in Europe over the years, but have yet to really establish themselves as a threat in Africa. They don't have enough evidence to show that they will be a World Cup team one day, but with the talent they produced over the years, all I think they need to do is fix themselves from an organizational standpoint with proper management, and they might finally be there. Probably not likely, but I'm going to put them at eventually. Kenya have had some star-studded names in their history, but too many things are just not going in their favor. Multiple FIFA suspensions, which is proof that their federation is severely flawed. Having qualified for numerous AFCONs and scraping through a decent amount of World Cup qualifier wins since 1974, it definitely has been a national team of a degree of caliber, just never enough to tell some fascinating football tale. They have made many teams struggle throughout time, but work is needed to be done within the federation for sure. I do think that when Kenya assemble the right pieces though, they could eventually qualify. Lesotho are a huge underdog in Africa, having only 3 qualifier wins in their history, one being in this campaign against Zimbabwe. Having never qualified for the AFCON before and having limited infrastructure, I think it's fair to say it's not likely that we'll be seeing this side at the World Cup. Liberia's closest attempt to qualifying for the World Cup was in 2002, just 1 point away from Nigeria, who were the ones to qualify. With no surprise, this fell under Weah's rule, making one of his final runs with the national team before the 2002 Africa Cup of Nations. Liberia were never close to reaching such heights again, but they're putting a hard-fought battle in their group right now at 3rd under Tunisia and Namibia. I think with all things considered, it might take some time for them to build themselves up once again. I'll put them at eventually. Libya are the only country of the Northern African coast who have never played at a World Cup. They were runners-up in AFCON though in 1982 when they hosted the tournament. The closest they made it to the World Cup tournament was not far away from that year in 1986, only losing 1 match to Morocco over a 2-leg tie after already overcoming Ghana and Sudan in a similar affair. In recent times though, Libya have seemed to go through a coaching crisis, with some managers claiming the federation was repeatedly interfering with their work as coach and reports of unpaid wages. But now who do they have? Aliou Cisse, who was the one in charge of Senegal all those years, including their AFCON victory, only just appointed in March 2025 as well. He has vowed to break Libya's 12-year major international tournament qualification drought, and overall fans are very optimistic about this as he's had a lot of success in Africa already. If right, maybe we could see Libya at a World Cup sometime soon. Madagascar might be the only African country Americans could name because of the film, but honestly as a national team in football they are extremely underrated, having an insane run in their only AFCON appearance reaching the quarterfinals, and right now are holding their own in World Cup 2026 qualification. I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off this time around in 2026, but I think it's fair to put them at soon. All it takes is one run like 2019 for them to write history, and now are appointing new eligible players, recently taking Akapandia for example. Their nation could definitely be known for more apart from holding the most one-sided victory in club football history. Malawi, despite being a small country, they do have a dense population, so they could utilize that to their advantage in the future. But financial constraints in the past have halted them from even participating in qualification campaigns. They have qualified for several AFCONs and only made it to the round of 16 once, squeezing through underdog Zimbabwe. But that's usually what it comes down to. One win against a quote-unquote weaker team and then underperforming the rest of the way. I could be generous and throw them out eventually, but I don't really see them having any signs of improvement, so I'm going to say not likely. For Mali's case, I'm a bit surprised they're falling so hard in this World Cup qualifier campaign. I mean, they obviously have a chance, but with the quality they have in recent years, they should be pushing for that top 2 spot. Yet they are 4th, With only one loss so far, they can definitely bounce back, but 2 draws already to Central African Republic. I don't know, even if they get that second place spot, I won't be surprised if they choke like they did in 2022. There's obviously still a chance though, so I will put them at the top, and we definitely should be seeing a side of this caliber qualify for the World Cup, with them recently having so many incredible players all over Europe. Mauritania is a very interesting one because they had an interesting run in 2023 AFCON, but only have 2 World Cup qualifier wins in their history. Despite frustrating some top teams, they always seem to be at the end of the pool. But now there is some emerging talent from the team. It's a tough task, but this side have shown a surprising rise in recent times. They might be able to just do it eventually, but I'm going to put them at not likely. Mauritius have qualified for 1 AFCON all the way back in 1974 and only accumulated 2 World Cup qualifier wins. I think it's fair to say not likely, but you could even throw them at the no chance tier. You know what? I changed my mind. They're going at no chance. Mozambique are battling it out for a 2026 spot, still in second place. If we're throwing in Comoros in the 2026 tier, we gotta throw them in as well. Definitely an underdog of Africa, but one where they have been acquiring some solid ballers. Mandava on Atletico Madrid, for example, to Katamo on Sporting, who's already gotten 10 goals with the national team. The nation have qualified for 5 AFCONs and have yet to get a win, but have really frustrated some teams along the way. But regardless, they're on the road for 2026 with their solid performances. They'll just have to overcome that Algeria goal deficit. Namibia impressively qualified for their first AFCON knockout round in the last tournament and have not slowed down since. Now they're second in the qualified group, undefeated still, going toe-to-toe with Tunisia, and are amongst the 4 best second place teams at the time of this recording. This is their time to push the glory. 2026 might be difficult, but it's definitely on the cards. Poor Equatorial Guinea though. I mean, technically the side aren't actually undefeated like we covered earlier. Niger for me goes in not likely. They somehow pull off wins against Ghana and do put off some good fights from time to time, but never a close chance to qualifying for the World Cup, and 2 poor AFCON qualifier campaigns over the last decade. Does not give me bright hope that this nation will make it. Rwanda are definitely also a huge underdog in the Confederation, but they've recently been pulling off shocks in the World Cup qualifiers. Currently second in their group, but by the finest of margins. It's not looking like it will stick by the end as they share points with Benin and are only 1 in front of Nigeria. But the country overall has been shaping into a much more positive light. Pre-2000, they were in a catastrophic state with the terrible and economy, but now are one of the cleanest countries in the world, and renovating their home grounds have been producing better results. They also play in high altitude, not to the same degree as Bolivia, but still, it could provide some advantage. The identity shift in trying to improve as a nation compared to pre-2000 makes me think we could see a rise in the national team as well sooner than we think. I don't think they'll do it for 2026, but soon is a fair shout. Sao Tome and Principe already eliminated in 2026 qualification and have only picked up 2 World Cup qualifier wins since 2002. None of them being in the 2026 tournament, it's a no chance for me, also given their very small population. Seychelles has got the coolest flag, the coolest beaches, but the worst record at World Cup qualification so far. Only losses including 9-0 to the Ivory Coast. They have yet to get a single win in World Cup qualification since 2002, so for me this easily goes at no chance. Only if they can somehow convince FIFA to be the hosts after hosting the Beach Soccer World Cup. Sierra Leone have had an interesting record right now in qualification, but previously have faced a numerous amount of setbacks. Like many of the other federations, lack of funding and inadequate facilities. But the Ebola outbreak in 2014 also set them back a bit, forcing match cancellations and restricting the team to play abroad. Also, their civil war prior definitely disrupted football development. Despite some interesting developments, they never really had any notable runs, so they're gonna have to be at not likely. When it comes to Somalia, things can definitely change course, but based on their history, the future is not looking so bright. They did not attempt to qualify for AFCON in over 30 years as FIFA sanctioned games, but also the sport was completely banned, for example, at one point, and the nation only just made history in 2019 to get their first ever World Cup qualifier win defeating Zimbabwe. It's still their only World Cup qualifier win to this date, as they have yet to get one for the 2026 tournament. Improvements have been made, but with the country having to face so many issues from left to right, it resulted in an undeveloped economic nation from decades of conflict. So many issues, I'm not going to bring up every single one. Somalia are going at not likely. Now, some nations we went over seem to be hindered due to civil wars going on, but there is one that is totally defying the odds. Sudan, I cannot believe we're saying it, are a 2026 contender. How long will this run last? I am not too sure, but they are still undefeated, sharing points with Senegal and 1 point behind DR Congo, who they did already defeat, by the way. This side are all the proof you need that this tier list I'm creating can be absolute BS, especially for this confederation in particular. Like I said, African football is too chaotic and unpredictable. What worries me about them though is their last result against their pals South Sudan, a side they should have gotten 3 points against, squeezed a point in the 98th minute with clumsy defending and goalkeeping, to South Sudan's insane acrobatics. This match gave Sudan a huge stint and really could hinder their chances to qualify for the 2026 World Cup. This group was already too difficult, so 3 points in a match like that was crucial, which makes me think it will be harder for them to qualify by the end, but I still think we should take Sudan quite seriously and put them at the top tier. Moving on to South Sudan. Despite them frustrating Sudan in that last match we just talked about, they have still never picked up a World Cup qualifier win, but have only been attempting to qualify since 2018. It's a very young national team, of course. They only played their first international match officially in 2012. This obviously makes it really hard to predict their direction going forward. Right now, it's not looking likely, but when you got the likes of Sudan doing bits, you truly just never know. Zambia have had some of the most heartbreaking but also heartwarming stories in football. With their squad suffering a plane crash in 1993, they still made it all the way to the AFCON final the following year, despite losing the lives of so many players. Then in 2012, they won the trophy in Gabon, which is where the plane crash occurred 19 years prior. Recently, this nation have dipped in form, but I always felt that their history made them one of the most underrated national teams in the world. From having legends all the way back in the day like Godfrey Chitolu, with 79 goals for the national team, equaling Neymar's tally for Brazil. And throughout history, they obviously had some really solid spells of form. I do think based off of all this nation's fight and grit, they will qualify for the World Cup at some point, maybe even soon. Zimbabwe have had some good strides in World Cup qualification, like in 1994 and 2002. They haven't been able to replicate that kind of admiration recently, but they still have some decent players to their disposal. Munetsi on Wolves, Zemura on Udinese, and their current German manager Nice in 5 matches hasn't picked up 1 loss yet, although most were draws. Nevertheless, it granted the nation AFCON qualification in 2025. Decent progress, but improvements are obviously needed. And it is challenging for a nation to play all their quote-unquote home matches abroad, like in South Africa or Rwanda, with non-improved FIFA facilities. There's definitely some hidden gems from this country, and I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually do it. We move on to CONCACAF now, probably one of the tougher confederations to call. Maybe only Africa is a bit worse. You see, with the expanded format, 6 spots are given to this confederation, but for the 2026 World Cup, there's just 3 technically, as 3 go to the hosts. So which remaining teams have a solid chance to qualify for the 2026 tournament? Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to be brief on a few of the countries in particular. There are many that have not even qualified for their main continental cup and are so low in the FIFA rankings. Anguilla definitely starts in the no chance tier. They should focus more on qualifying for the Caribbean Cup, as the better teams in CONCACAF always get the best of them. They are also ranked as the 2nd worst national team in the world. US Virgin Islands are only 1 rank above them. You can argue that they're just as bad, and the British Virgin Islands are not much better. And while Turks and Caicos could be one of the most luxurious holiday destinations, their dreams of qualifying for World Cup are as realistic as mine being able to afford a trip there. The Bahamas only picked up 2 World Cup qualifier wins for the 2014 tournament, but had to withdraw as their stadium was not complete and could not host anybody. Such disorganization, with the only glimpse of them doing somewhat well, has me thinking that they have no chance. Aruba might be slightly better in this qualification campaign, but hard to trust them as well. And the Cayman Islands, yeah, I feel like I'm getting repetitive at this point. Maybe we should speedrun this tier more. Other countries that I think have no chance are Dominica and Montserrat. Belize are quite poor, but they actually did qualify for the Gold Cup before and racked up a good amount of wins in 2014. Alright, I'll bump them up to not likely. And they'll be joined with St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Barbados. Dominican Republic only just qualified for their first ever CONCACAF Gold Cup, which is a huge improvement. They've also had one of Real Madrid's greatest players, Mariano Diaz, but only played 2 matches for the national team. Jokes aside, they still have a lot of solid players representing the team, like Junior Firpo on Leeds United, who has 10 assists in the championship. In World Cup qualification at the moment, they do have a chance to turn things around, but they were placed in a very challenging group and already picked up their first loss to Jamaica. I actually do think this country are improving their football as a whole and maybe could qualify soon with the expanded format. Puerto Rico have never qualified for the CONCACAF Gold Cup, but are showing a promising run of form right now. Defeating Anguilla 8-0 and holding off El Salvador to a draw has made them a talking point so far in this World Cup qualifier campaign, but in the CONCACAF Nations League, they did struggle to a team not even approved by FIFA. They're too inconsistent for me to think 2026 is in the cards for them, but maybe, just maybe, down the line in the future, they could eventually qualify for a World Cup. Bermuda, though, I'm going to have to throw them at not likely. Getting some solid wins against the other CONCACAF minnows, but very much still struggling against the stronger sides. Like many of the other CONCACAF nations that I'm doubting, their population is extremely low. Compare that to Iceland, who hold the record of the least populated country to qualify for a World Cup. Their current captain placed in the 7th or 8th tier of English football, and one of their strikers plays for Syracuse University. Curacao, though, These guys are surprising 2026 contenders for me. A nation that is on the rise with promising talent, along with an experienced coach, Advocaat. He's previously managed the Netherlands and brings up a lot of expertise to the squad. And they have a lot of great connections to the Netherlands. With a lot of players having Curaçaoan heritage, it bolsters the squad's depth and talent. They're currently leading their group over Haiti, and I'd argue they've got a favorable draw. As long as they can continue to improve. They were shortly done in the last campaign to Panama in the second round, losing 2-1 over a 2-leg affair. With less competition now in CONCACAF and more World Cup spots, there is definitely a chance for them to shine. Grenada have played in 3 CONCACAF Gold Cups in their history, but did not pick up a win or even a draw in a single tournament. The Spice Boys play with heart, but not enough pedigree to qualify for a World Cup. They have never reached the third round of World Cup qualification, and it's looking to be tough. I think that it's not likely we'll see Grenada at the World Cup. But Guatemala are going to join Curaçao as 2026 contenders. The nation has already had so many shortcomings in World Cup qualification, despite having many impressive displays. 2 points behind Trinidad and Tobago to get into Confederation playoffs for 2006, sharing points with Jamaica in the 2014 third round. 2018 again heartbroken to Trinidad by just a point, and in 2022 they shared points with Curaçao, even had the same goal difference, but couldn't progress to the next rounds. To further prove that their performances were really solid, they had Carlos Ruiz, who's the top goal scorer in World Cup qualification history, but Messi and Ronaldo are catching up. But yeah, I do think Guatemala finally have what it takes to qualify for World Cup after all those shortcomings. Guyana, based on their location, it would have been interesting to see them compete in CONMEBOL, as in CONCACAF they only had somewhat of a decent amount of wins back in 2014, but still lost far too much. And their huge reason for a lack of success is the lack of their facilities. Scouting in general has also been slow and poor. People who could be eligible still prefer to represent other national teams. Work needs to be done. They could eventually find a way, but for now, it's not looking good. Nicaragua have surprisingly yet to make an appearance, but Pinoleros are ones to watch, I reckon. Inconsistent performances, but they could squeeze through to an intercontinental playoff spot this season. The results recently have been a bit sluggish, but with them top of their table, they just need to not blow it to Guyana. Maybe they can surprise group favorites Panama. I'll put them at 2026, maybe soon is more realistic, but I think they have a chance. St. Kitts and Nevis is seen as one of the biggest underdogs in the Confederation, but surprisingly, they have a 1 win-loss ratio in World Cup qualifying. Nicknamed the Sugar Boys, they still struggle too much against the higher ranks of CONCACAF. This is due to many reasons, but with such a small population and only a semi-professional league within the nation, it obviously hinders player development. I think it might have to be not likely, but who knows what the future holds. But to finish off this video on a positive note, let's go over Suriname, who I think could qualify for the World Cup next year. This nation has a lot of players who were actually born in the Netherlands, and a lot of current Dutch players who would have been eligible to play for this team. Lots of ballers from this nation are playing across Europe, and are probably one of the most underrated teams in the world that will surely qualify for the World Cup at some point. Overall, even if they fail in 2026, the future's still looking bright, with CONCACAF having so many more spots. And their talent pool is only increasing. Suriname used to be a lot more strict when it came to dual citizenship, but with more relaxed rules in terms of a sports passport, which was only introduced in 2019, they can field more ballers playing across Europe. Yes, somewhat of a similar situation to Curaçao. The recruitment push has been on the rise as well, with more training facilities located in the Netherlands. Well, there you have it, guys. That's the final confederation I'm going over, and this is the longest video I've ever made on my channel. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Please, if you enjoyed, it would mean the world if you hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. And of course, this has all just been my opinion, so let me know your thoughts as always in the comments below with any disagreements you have. There are times where I genuinely learn a lot from you guys in the comments whenever I miss out on any information in specific. And with so many national teams to go over, it's hard to keep track of how each one is doing behind the scenes and all that. If your team has not qualified for the World Cup, even if I ranked you so low, best of luck to your nation in the future. If it means my nation can qualify for the World Cup, I only wish more and more can make their debut, within reason obviously. FIFA, let's please not expand the World Cup any further. I mean, 64 is already a bit ridiculous. Anyway, thank you all for making it to the end. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content related to the World Cup. A lot of stuff will be coming up soon as we're about to approach international break. Take care, la noite.